What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and this week we have a brand new batch of daily races to tackle. So before we get started on this first car, if you're new to the channel and you haven't seen any of my previous videos, go check those out because they offer some insight as to why I choose specific upgrades and tune settings for every car that I've featured so far. And if you're a returning viewer, I hope you enjoyed this one as much as you enjoyed the others. And if you find this video helpful, as always, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already. And with that being said, let's get started. So this car right here is a fantastic option for Daily Race C. It's pretty easy to drive, it's very fast in terms of lap time and top speed, it's pretty generous on fuel and tires, and you get it as a launch edition bonus for the game, so just about everybody has one of these. So this is the Mazda RX Vision GT3 concept, and it is my car of choice for this week for Daily Race C. So let's take a look at how I've tuned this car. We don't need to go to GT Auto for this one. There's no body kit that you can put on Gr.3 cars. They've already got the wing and the splitters on and whatnot. There are a few upgrades you will need to purchase though to make these competitive, because instead of BOP this week, there was some issues getting BOP to work because people were bypassing with upgrades. I have a video on that on the channel as well if you'd like to check that out. But since they're no longer BOP races, that is no longer an issue. But now that means we can freely upgrade and tune as long as we meet the power and weight restrictions, just like Daily Race B last week. So 3 upgrades you'll need to do this are the ballast, the fully customizable racing transmission, and then a medium RPM turbo. If you're wondering why I've purchased the turbo and not just used normal power upgrades or just no power upgrades, if you click on my Celica video, link is in the description, I'll explain why using turbo upgrades and then restricting the engine is to your advantage. But yeah, besides those 3 parts, you don't really need to purchase anything. The full computer should come on the car already. So with the upgrades out of the way, we can focus on the tune, and this one's a bit different than the others. The race cars in this game, they seem a little bit more sensitive to some other settings that were kind of just thrown at the wall with the production cars, so I'd like to talk about those a bit. So as far as ride height goes, you can see we are extremely low on ride height in race cars, and the same logic applies to having your ride height too low and causing steering issues, bottoming out, and whatnot. So I've gone a little bit up on the front and then just set the rear to achieve the balance that I like. So I'm going to go a bit out of order here because the next most important setting, these kind of go hand in hand, ride height and downforce. The downforce is super important on Daytona because it is almost entirely focused on top speed. So you really want to make sure you're getting as much speed as possible without sacrificing too much handling. So you can see I've gone for no aero on the front, and then I've just added enough rear aero to achieve the balance I need on the car. And then everything else is taken off just to get as much top speed as possible. So for anti-roll bars, it's similar to how I've tuned them before. On rear-wheel drive cars, I tend to make them pretty even and then pretty stiff, and then just tweak them until I get the balance I like. So that's what I've done here. Similar trends with the damping, very soft on the compression and pretty stiff on the expansion, and then even stiffer on the front. So I can get a little bit more traction powering out of corners. Because again, rear grip is sorely lacking in this game, so I've tried to tune this car to have as much rear grip on exits as possible, while trying not to make it too funky in other areas. So natural frequency. This is something that is a lot bigger of a knob to turn in race cars and production cars. You will notice a lot more of a difference changing this from soft to stiff than in a production car. So the reason I went soft on this is because there's not a lot of downforce on the car. So the stiffer your springs are, the more downforce you'll typically need to keep things in check, just to keep things simple. I guess that's the simplest way I can explain it. So if you're not running a lot of downforce, you should go softer on your natural frequency. That's just a good rule of thumb to abide by. And then I've gone slightly stiffer on the front than the rear, just to dial out some natural oversteer tendencies. And we're back with the silly camber. 0 camber on the rear again. Some cars I've been testing actually like a little bit of rear camber, but you still want it pretty low. I wouldn't go much above like 1.5 degrees or so. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure why it works, but it does. I'm sticking to it until something changes. And then we don't really, I'm not a big fan of tow. I don't like using it unless it's a last resort, and especially on a track that needs a lot of straight line speed. Basically, if you have toe in, you're pigeon toeing your tires, and it gives you more stability. And then if you're toe out, you're pointing them towards the corner naturally without steering. So there's pros and cons to each, but some people that know a lot more about performance driving than I do at my job, they say if you need toe out, you just need to turn in earlier instead. So I've abided by that for a while now. I just run zero toe, and this gives you a bit more straight line speed. So we're going with that. Differential, this is kind of important on this car. Initial torque, I could go really in depth on what this exactly does, but basically you're using this to set where your differential settings actually kick in. So I made them kick in fairly early, and then I made the accel sensitivity pretty low, so there's less tendency to oversteer on throttle, and then braking sensitivity is also pretty low. So I get some nice turn in, but it's not too snappy. And then for the ECU, what we've done is we've just set this where we have the power restrictor as low as possible, and then we adjust the ECU and then kind of balance the two out until we hit max power. And you want the power restrictor to be as low as possible because that gives you a better power curve, as you can see here. So what happens here is on the restrictor, that peak actually gets pulled down because all the event cares about is your peak power, but the rest kind of stays relatively the same. Whereas with the ECU adjustment, your power curve doesn't get pulled down like that. So it's in your best interest to set your power restrictor as low as possible. And then our ballast, we have quite a bit of ballast in the car, and it is very far back. I'm surprised that this worked in this car because that's a lot of weight to send to the back. And I've actually been trying this in some mid-engine cars. It does not work. It was my rule of thumb in production cars, but it does not work in some cars. Do not just use this as a hard and fast rule. As a starting point, you could maybe put it to like 20 or so. Just don't try to get too crazy with the weight distribution. It'll tell you on the left here, like my weight distribution is 4456, which isn't too bad. It's probably decent for putting down power in a rear wheel drive car, but yeah, so this I would not recommend just throwing on every car, but it happens to work on this one. And then I also want to talk about the brakes. This car is tuned a little aggressively. It's kind of required for Daytona because of the lack of aero, so we're compensating with some front balanced brakes. And this just allows more stability while trail braking and getting the car pitched in for each corner. So in production cars, I was setting it to the back, but those were four-wheel drive cars with, they weren't exactly the most handling capable cars compared to something like this. So this car's got a lot more grip, and it can oversteer a lot quicker if you get it wrong. So this is kind of a fail-safe and a nice balance between the rest of the settings on the car. And then finally, we'll go over the gearbox. This gearbox, again, it's a nice one-size-fits-all. You can use this in time trial. You can use this in a race. If you're really stuck in a slipstream, you might run out of gear. I haven't been in that situation yet. But if you do find yourself in that situation, then lengthen 5th and 6th gear a few clicks just so you don't run out of gear if you're slipstreaming somebody. But that's about it for the setup. There's just a couple things I wanted to go over as far as the event, because this one is the first daily race, I believe, that has fuel and tire wear. So I want to talk a bit about strategy with this car too, because if you get it wrong, it could cost you a lot of time in the race. So as you can see on the event, we have 7 times fuel consumption and 15 times tire wear. What that means is you're going to be taking one pit stop because it's a 10-lap race. So you're going to be pitting for fuel, absolutely. This car's pretty darn good on fuel. You can run almost the whole race on map 1. I think on the first stint you need to run like a lap or less even on map 2, but the rest you can go map 1. And then after you make your pit stop, you can run map 1 to the end of the race. I know some cars you have to go down to map 2 or even 3, but this car you can just go full power almost the whole race. And as far as tires go, you're stuck on racing hards, so they don't wear that quickly compared to like a medium or a soft. But they do wear quickly in this particular event. So you have the option to change out tires during your pit stop if you want to. Now, I think it is worth it because the pit stop costs you about 6 seconds extra if you put tires on. And I ran one race with tires and one race without tires. And the race without tires, the tires started to fall off, and while the car was drivable, I had some issues with it, and I was losing probably about a second and a half a lap towards the last few laps of the race. And it was actually getting so bad in the bus stop in particular that I actually had to dial the brake bias forward to a -4. So it is an option though. Say if you really need to maintain your track position, you can opt not to take tires. But if you're just going for outright pace and you want to get the fastest race time possible, then I would definitely recommend swapping tires. Even if someone in front of you doesn't swap tires, you'll be able to close on them so quickly between your increased cornering ability and how fast this car is on the straights, especially in a slipstream, that it's not going to be an issue getting by anybody that didn't take tires. But yeah, that's all I have for this car. I think it's a pretty good summary of how to approach it. Again, you don't have to do exactly what I did here, but I think this is a pretty good starting point for most people. And regardless of your settings, I don't think the race strategy will change. So just stick to something close to this and then stick to the race strategy I went over, and you should have quite a bit of success in Daily Race C this week. If you found this video helpful, again, leave a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time. Thanks.